So first off, the review, we're not going to do too much review this time. I think we have that all covered. If you want to do a review, we have all our slides and videos posted from before and the documents from before, like the HTML tags references, CSS tags, CSS styles reference. You can check those. We're just going to go over what do professional websites and interactive websites really have, and what do they look like? We're going to talk about how we can link multiple files together. So in CodePen, what we've been doing so far is having like our CSS, HTML, and JavaScript in these three neat sections. But when we're actually like deploying a website, we want to see how we can do that in a more professional, organized way. And then we're going to go into our next project, which is going to be the shop project. So look at the past slides. And so let's see how we can make professional looking websites, kind of like how we talked about before with the modern looking websites, but this time it's going to be like with the elements that we absolutely need when we're making a good looking website. So if you think about like, kind of like Adi mentioned before, the websites like Nike, H&M, Amazon, like all these store websites, what they do is like, they have this structure to them, this really common structure, right? They'll have like, if you look, they'll have like a menu at the top. They'll have a bunch of blocks of items, pictures, elements, neatly ordered bulleted lists and things like that, so that it's really easy for the person to just go on the website and do what they want to do, right? And they're also not just like sharing news or just giving info like a blog. They're actually having the users go on their website and interact with it to keep them there for longer. Right, so one of like the biggest things, like let's break down the Nike website, right? What do? They have like a nav bar and menu at the very top, and it has many categories on it for people to click on immediately when they see it. So they have like a new and featured category, a men's category, women category, kids category, or an on sale category. And they have like your shopping cart or bag, or they have like a search bar right there, and they have their logo, of course. And that's basically like, if you see this structure, it's all to serve like a common purpose, like a real, like kind of like a more complicated purpose than just giving user info. It's like so that they can go from point A, which is clicking the website, to point B, the very end, like the end point, which is where they actually buy a product. And that's basically because websites should be like programs. They're kind of just like computer programs, but in a different way. And if you see, it's kind of like the similar things we've been doing like this whole time. So we have like bulleted lists on the sides, which is actually covered by the yellow. We should reveal that later. But yeah, there's like bulleted lists on maybe like the left-hand side. There's a header, the section header, like men's Air Max shoes, which we talked about, like the H1, H2 tags, like the header tags. That's basically what that is. And every like element here with like the shoe pictures and the captions and like that bestseller text or the links there, those are just those div blocks we've been talking about, right? When we put like a picture and a lot of text into a block and we have them organized, that's the same as the div tag that we've always been looking at. And so this nav bar, this is going to be the really important thing when we're going forward from here. The nav bar, which is like this very top menu I have over here, where I say nav bar menu full of different categories. That's the element I'm talking about. It's the bar at the very top of the website that holds all those links and buttons that help you go to those different pages of your website. So instead of having just one page of your website, you want multiple pages so you can fit a lot of info and a lot of different functions across the website. So it's not just a user having to scroll all the way down or being limited to one page. And it's super important because it's at the very top and it can help the user immediately get to where they want, even if they're not super experienced at using like computers or technology, which is like why you'll see everybody can use a website, but not everybody can use the program, right? And so the idea is basically you have to make sure that this nav bar, everything you put in there, every item, every link or button, you're going to make sure that it can you can use it to go anywhere on your website. So you don't have to do any complex searching. It should just be like a click and you can go anywhere you want. And if you see, like, here's some good examples. Like Amazon's done a really good job of this. They even have like a little all button on the very top left that can help you see all the categories. Or right here listed, they have like a sign-in button, your cart, your location, and they have all the categories of their shop and their products. Nike, as we looked at, did it really well too. Roblox does it really well when they have like a search bar. Search bar is a really important thing to have in your website as well. Usually when it's like a complicated website, we don't have to get into that too much though. And H&M, like a clothing store, like a clothing brand, of course, it's super important for them to have their clothing categories and everything too, and like important info, like the students get 20% off. Yeah. So the way we can make a nav bar in HTML is actually, it's much simpler than we would think. So it's not a new tag or anything else. We're using the tags we've used before, which is just div and a tags. So if you recall, the a tag is just a link tag and a div tag is just a block tag. You can think of the navbar as just like a big block that spans the entire width of the website. So what we want to do is in our CSS, well, first off, we want to give an ID to our div, right? We want to give it an ID navbar, which is the most common ID that's used for these navbars. That helps you really understand and like see which one it is. We just give it this ID navbar, and then in our CSS, we specify that we want its width to be 100%. And what that's doing is we're saying, okay, instead of using like a common unit like a pixel, we're just going to set the width to 100%, meaning we want the width to be 100% of the website. So whatever size the website is, like no matter how much we resize the screen, or no matter what screen we're looking on, like a phone or a website, it's going to be 100% of that. And then inside the div, because we know we can store different kinds of tags or whatever tags we want inside of a div, we're going to store these links in there, right? We're going to have like a home link, a store link, an about us link. And these are just some examples, but you can do this. You kind of just like do this however you want, any sections that you want. But basically the idea is you want a link to every category or page of your website that you want to go to. And actually, I'm going to drop this in the chat in case you want to see what it looks like on CodePen, because it's kind of interesting to see that actually take place on your website. And so the body, which is basically what comes, is everything that comes after the navbar tag. And that's everything we reviewed up to this point. It's just going to be like, and the body is actually a special tag that's used in HTML that we're going to get to later as we're doing the linking files part of this unit. But basically everything that goes in the body is what we've reviewed so far. So it could be div elements like thumbnails, pictures, images, P elements like info, tags, and paragraphs, or lists like UL and OL. And basically we're just going to use all those elements we have now, but we're going to use it and base it off of other websites to make it look more modern. And I think that was pretty, I mean, if anyone has any questions, they can always say, but I think that was pretty straightforward. So now we're going to get into the linking files together part. So using that information, using our HTML, CSS, JavaScript, how can we use multiple files and link them together? So first, we're going to set up a new IDE that allows for like making with multiple pages and not just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And there's like a lot of IDEs online that you can use. Like there's the Code Sandbox, Replit, Glitch, VS Code, etc. But we're going to be using Code Sandbox, and Audie's going to do a little tutorial of how to sign up for Code Sandbox and how to use it right now.
Okay, just make sure to go to Google or any web engine that you use and search up Code Sandbox or any IDE that you already use and know how to use. But we're going to be using Code Sandbox. And let me sign out so I can show you guys how to sign in or sign up. Go ahead and write either sign in with Google's or any of these options, and you can follow through the sign in process. So once you're in Code Sandbox, go ahead and click this top right. In this top right, there's going to be a create plus button. Click on that and select create a sandbox. And out of all of these options, select HTML plus CSS Code Sandbox. So if you click on this, it's going to take you to a randomly named project, and you're going to see something similar to this. So right now we're just going to go over what Code Sandbox really looks like and how do we navigate it. So towards the left side, you have your project files, and you can see you have your index.html, you have your styles.css. So those are already two programming languages we already are familiar with. Ignore the package.json. We're not going to be using that. In the center, we have our code IDE. This is where we're going to type all of our code. It can be either HTML or CSS or JavaScript. It just depends on which file you have open. And towards the right, we have a preview section, which is going to display what our website is supposed to look like. And you can actually click this top right icon with the two windows to open it in a new tab. So for example, if I wanted to open this in a new tab, I can click on this and it takes me to this website. So I can view the full length of it. So over here, this entire HTML that we have set up in our Code Sandbox over here is a little complicated, but we're going to break it down one by one. So the first part is our exclamation doc type HTML. This entire section basically tells our computer that the document that we're currently editing is an HTML file. That's the entire purpose of this section. The second part, the HTML tags, tells our computer that what we're writing inside of these tags is HTML code. And you could ignore this lang en section, but that tells the computer that we're writing in English. But you keep in mind that HTML tags are used to tell the computer that whatever we're writing inside of these is HTML code. And then we have two separate tags called a head and then a body. The primary difference between these two tags is that the header tag contains links to CSS file or any data that we want the browser or computer to know. The body tag, on the other hand, is going to contain what we want to display on the browser. So for example, in this case, you can ignore this meta tag. The meta tag just tells the browser what all's on the web, like what all information they need to know. So we can actually just completely remove it. It's redundant. It's outside of the scope of this class. But the title tag sets the title of our website. So if I go back to our page over here, if you look at the top side, you can see it says HTML plus CSS. If I change the title to something else called, I don't know, testing, for example, if I ran the preview, you can notice that the title of the page is now testing. And then the link tag tells the computer that we want to link a style sheet or a CSS file to our website. So the rel tells us that the file that we're linking is a CSS file. So link rel is equals a style sheet tells the computer that whatever we're putting after our href is our CSS file. And the href basically directs the computer to the CSS file we want to link. So in this case, we have our styles.css over here, and we have our href. This is what the href is referring to. And then our body tag can contain our script file. So in order to create a new file inside of CodePen, you're going to click this plus arrow, and you're going to type in script.js. So let me do that. You're going to click this plus arrow over here, type in script.js, or whatever you want to call it, and that'll create a new file. So in our body tag, we're going to add a script tag, and we're going to link our JavaScript file through that. This is going to allow us to directly incorporate any JavaScript code into our website.
Okay, so like we said at the start of the this lesson, we're going to be making a JavaScript website entirely from scratch. This time, we're not going to build off other tags. We're going to try to use everything we learned over the past 2 weeks and make a fully functioning interactional website. So just a preview of what it is. Basically, it's going to be kind of like the store examples we saw before, right? And here we have 3 of the same item. So it's just going to be a basic store. It's not going to be something too complicated. But using this, what Adi went over just now with having different pages and having these different files to help you make a website, we're going to make it so that we have a nav bar at the top. We're going to have some code maybe that helps us increase that cart number counter whenever we add a new product. And for adding, you could just make it something like clicking the product or clicking an item or anything like that. We're going to add CSS and modern styles to maybe have some interesting fonts like this, not just Times New Roman. We're going to have like a header tag to show like the store section, maybe the home section. We're going to have like a paragraph tag to show like a description of the website. And then each of these products should ideally be a div with like a special border on it, with a picture inside of it and a description inside of it as well. And also the price tag. So here we have a pretty exaggerated price tag, but we just wanted to kind of make like a fun fake website. You don't have to make it anything kind of real. You can kind of be selling anything you want here. Honestly, the more creative, the better it is, honestly. Just like imagine whatever website you want to make, and then as you follow along, Adi, you can kind of add whatever creative input you want into it.
Okay, so I'm just going to delete all of our meta tags since they're pretty redundant. We are not going to be using them. And inside of the title, I'm going to call it our store, and Code Sandbox has already linked our style sheet. And now all we have to do is basically add the content to our body tags. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a nav bar to our website. So I'm gonna go ahead and first create a HTML actually provides something called a nav tag, but we can just use the div instead. You're gonna create a div tag, and I'm gonna add a class to it called navbar, and then I'm gonna create an unordered list, and then inside of each, so this basically is gonna create a list of items. This is gonna be our links to each page in our website. So I'm gonna have a list item, and I'm gonna have an A tag. So A tags, remember that it's a link to another website or another page on your website. So I'm gonna have an A tag, and I'm gonna have it linked to, let's say, index.html. So typically when you're coding websites, index.html is gonna be the home page of the website. So we have an A tag, and then we have a list item. So we're going to have a list of links. We're going to call this home. And then similarly, I can just copy and paste this a couple of times. And I want to change this to shop. Oh, and then you can have a contact. So similarly, I'm going to have a shop.html and a contact.html. Notice that I haven't actually created the files over here. We'll be doing that later. But if you open it in a new tag right now, you can see that we have three basic links. If you click on the home one, it takes you to the home page. If you click on the shop, it doesn't actually do anything, and same with the contact. So I kind of want to make it look a little better. So I'm going to go into our CSS. You can remove this H1 style. And I'm going to say .navbar to edit the styles for the navbar. So we're going to be editing the styles for this specifically. And I'm going to change the background color to something like white smoke. So it's an offset of white. And I want to have it as display flex. And I want to justify content space between. You can look into these tags, by the way, through Google if you don't understand what they do. And I'm going to.
And guys, real quick, so notice we might not have gone over this too much. We mostly use IDs, but Adi's using a class right now. So in the CSS, instead of using the hashtag like we usually do for classes, you just use a dot. Which, like, hey, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Yeah. I guess anyone else can do that.
And as we previously learned, we're going to add a padding, and Burkhan mentioned the use of rem. So we're going to do 0.35 rem and then 1 rem. So 0.35 is going to be your vertical padding, and then the 1 rem is going to be your horizontal. So now if I preview this now, or refresh this, you can notice that now we have a little background on our nav bar, and we've padded it a little. And we have
just for clarification, that rem is kind of just like another unit you can use for sizing. So we have pixel percentage and we have rem, and there's like a lot of other ones too. Yeah.
The reason why we chose to use rem is that it scales depending on the size of the screen. You can use pixels or whatever you want. Making your website compatible is not that important right now. We're just trying to get the basic knowledge out. But okay. So now we want to change this so it's not a list, but rather it's side by side as typical nav bars up here. So I'm going to do something called nesting our classes. So we're going to do .navbar. I'm going to say UL. So this is a little confusing, but basically what we're saying is for every class navbar, I want to target the specific UL nested inside of the navbar. So in this case, when we say .navbar UL, we're talking specifically about these UL tags nested inside of a navbar class. So if I wanted to target these list items instead, so I can say .navbar UL and then LI. This goes from the class navbar to the unordered list to the list item. So if I really wanted to also target the A tags inside of it, I could do navbar ULLIA. So this goes from the navbar class to the UL to the list item to the A tag. So for the unordered list, I don't want it to have bullet points. So that's where the list style tag comes in, and I want to say none. So that's going to remove those dots, and I want to remove any padding that exists on there, and I want to make it a flex display. On refreshing it, you can see that these are now placed side by side. If I didn't add a flex display, these would be stacked vertically, but upon adding a flex display, these are now stacked horizontally. And for each item, notice how there's no space between them. So I want to create a space between the home, shop, and contact field. So instead of adding padding to say the UL, we want to add padding to the LI. So if you look at each element, that's an LI, that's a list item, that's a list item, and that's a list item. And I want to create spacing between each one of them. So what I'm going to do is for each list item, I want to add a margin towards the right of say 1 rem. You can adjust these values depending on what you find is better, but I like a margin of 1 rem. Okay. So notice how each list item over here, each A tag, each link has a purple and an underline. So we effectively want to remove that. So what we're going to do now is called something called text decoration. So if we do text decoration none, this is going to remove any hyperlinks or any underlines that show up when you have a link. Okay. So now we have our basic navbar set up. I think the font looks pretty bad because it's Times New Roman. So I'm going to go search up Google Fonts. And inside of Google Fonts, you can actually browse a bunch of fonts. We haven't done this before, so I'm going to select the import and I'm going to go to style. And I'm going to take a look at the @import over here. And I'm just going to go to our CSS and I'm going to copy and paste that. So this is just basically going to import our our font through our CSS. And again, you can do that through selecting our font. And then over here, you're going to, instead of doing the link, you're going to select the @import. And then inside of our CSS file here, I'm going to say in our overall HTML tag. So this is our HTML over here. I want the font family to be Roboto and sans serif. Let me refresh this. The font's been updated. And I'm going to change the color for each link by doing color. And I'm going to change it to blue. Cyan. Okay. You can change these values to whatever you want. But I will continue. So inside of our homepage, this is going to be our homepage. I want to add some content. So I'm going to add a header tag inside of our body called home. And inside of our homepage, I'm just going to copy and paste some text, some filler text to add to our homepage. So this is just going to say, welcome to our online store, yada, yada, yada. I refresh it. It's going to add some text. And notice how this home doesn't feel too nice because it's very wide and very spread out. There's no spacing on the sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to nest these the content of the page inside of another div and apply a class called container. I'm going to take all of our code and I'm going to nest it inside of a container. And inside of our CSS, I'm going to create a new class called container. I'm going to add a margin on the sides. So I want 0 margin on the top, but on the sides, I want to give it, say, 2 rem. So now if I refresh this, it's now added padding to the x-axis. So I can, in fact, bump it up to something a little bigger. So now it's kind of centered our text a little more, and it's added some space to the side. Yeah. And now we're going to create a shop page. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click this plus button, type in shop.html to create a shop website. And we're going to do the same thing that we did in our index.html and set up a basic HTML file through the exclamation doc type. We're going to set up our HTML tags. And inside of our HTML, we want a head tag. And we want a body tag. Inside of our head, I want the same title of our story. Inside of the body, I'm going to add content, but I want to link our style sheet. And I want to link our script file. So now if I go back over here, if I click the shop, it takes us to an empty page. I can even add a header over here. Just say items. I go back over here and click to our shop. It says items. So I want the same nav bar on our website. So I'm just going to copy and paste the nav bar. So we have our nav bar both on our home page and our shop. And as a matter of fact, I want the same container. The same container. So I'm going to go, and you can see we've also added a padding to our items now. So we have a home page and we have a shop page. Inside of our shop page, I'm not going to add elements to basically show what all items we're selling. So I'm going to create a div, call it item list. And inside of our item list, I am going to go ahead and add another div with the class item. And inside of each item, I want an image. I'm going to apply a class called item image to it that we're going to create later. And I want to add a source to it that I'm also going to add later. And then I'm going to add another div. I'm going to call this item contents, which is basically going to store all of our information regarding the description of the item, the name of the item, and the price of the item. And I'm going to add p tag with the class of item header, a p tag for the item description. I shortened description to DSCP for description, and we're going to do another p tag for the item's cost. Okay. So I'm going to pick out our first item to sell. I'm going to search up portal gun for fun. And Use this one. So I'm going to right click on this and select save image as. You can select where to save it. And then inside of our code sandbox, we can actually import the file by, oh, by dragging our file into this area over here. And upon doing that, we now have a image that we can actually link. So instead in our src, what we're going to do is dot slash, and we're going to select our image name. So now if I refresh this, we now have a portal gun on our store. So again, go to your image, you want to right click it, select save image as, save the image, and then drag and drop it into our node box over here to add it to our project. So we've added our image, and now I want to add the content. The name of our item is just going to be a portal gun. And the description, I added a portal gun to go anywhere, and then bolded the anywhere for fun. And the price is some absurdly huge amount. So now if I refresh this, you can see we have our item over here. We have the name of our item, the description of our item, and the cost of our item. But that doesn't look too appealing, so we're going to modify our CSS now to fix that. Let me adjust this real quick so you guys can see this better. Okay. So I'm going to now modify the item image because the item image is way too big right now. I'm going to actually let's modify the item list first. In our item list, I'm going to set the max width to 100%. So basically what this does is it makes sure it does not extend past the boundaries we've set it. And we're going to text align center. So when we do that, it's actually going to be centered on our page, which is what we want. And now for each item, I want to change the size of it because right now each item is too big. And we can do that by specifying the width of it. I'm going to specify the width of each one to be 15 rem. And I'm going to add margins between each one. So I'm going to add a margin of 1 rem. And I'm going to set the display to an inline block to basically have them display side by side. So now if I refresh this, it's a little wacky, but we will be fixing that later. And I'm going to set the border radius to 15 pixels. I refresh this. Doesn't look like it's done anything right now, but when we add more items and we add more CSS, it will become apparent. So actually, I'm going to add another item, and I'm going to set it to a laptop. And we can change the size of it. But keep in mind, you guys can set up the laptop to anything you want, or sorry, the items in the store to anything you want. You guys, I'm gonna say, refresh this. We have another laptop over here. Kind of overlapping right now. Again, we will fix that through changing our item list. So we've set it center, set the max width. And now I'm gonna change the item image to have the width at 100%. And if I change this now, it's changed the width of our box. So originally the size of the image was going past our grid, And now upon setting the width of our item image, it's now the same width as the item. So if you take a look, the item image is nested inside of the item, and the 100% is telling our browser that the width of the image should be the same size, the same width as our item. So now we have two items over here. We can actually set the background image of each item, background color of each item now. So what I'm going to do, so I'm going to set a background color for each item to be white smoke again. I'll refresh this. So now these all have a border, as you can see. And as you can see, these cards are curved at the bottom, but not at the top. That's because what we've actually done is we've set the border radius for the item, but we haven't actually set up the border radius for the image itself. So the item div over here is curved, but our image isn't. And we can make our image curved by doing border radius, border top left radius, and when you type it inherit, it tells CSS to take the border radius of the parent class, parent tag. So in this case, the parent tag will be the item. And when we say border radius inherit, it's going to inherit the border of our item. Border top right radius is also going to be inherit because you want to inherit just those two parts. So now if I refresh it, you can see that our border is perfectly curved and we have an item on the top and a description on the bottom. But now the text is a little too close to the border, so we can actually modify that by changing the padding. So we can do that by doing dot item content. So keep in mind that our item content over here contains all of this stuff. And we can set it to have a margin of 1 rem. Refresh this. As you can see, it's added those margins, or we can even work with padding. But in this case, I think margin looks a little better. So we're sticking with margin. Okay. Does anybody have any questions so far? I'm going through this pretty fast. Okay. If there's no questions, I'll continue. But in this case, I want the margins or paddings to be only on the sides and not on the top. So I'm just going to write 0 for the top, and I'm going to write 1 rem for the sides. Change these to a bigger value. Okay, there you go. And I want the title to kind of stand out. So I'm going to go again in our CSS and go into item header. I'm going to change the font size, something a little bigger, maybe 16 pixels. Change this to 24. There you go. And we can also bold this through our fonts weights tag of bold to bold the title of each item. And now I also want to have the cost of the item stand out. So again, I'm going to do the same thing by doing item cost. I'm going to do font size, and I'm going to have it 20 pixels. Font weight is also bold. There you go. And I can even change the color to a gray. There. And just for fun, I'm going to add a border to our items now. We can do that by doing dot item. For each item, I want to add a border. And for each border, I want to add a dash border. And I want it to be color red. So if I refresh this, we now have a dash border around each item. Oh. And they're gray. Yeah, there you go. Let me know when you guys can see it.
Let me see it.
Okay, cool. So last time we created a basic website that has a navigation bar up here that has a home and a shop page. Let me open it in a new tab. So as a home page and then a shop page. In our shop page, we added two items, which is a portal gun and then a laptop. So right now our website looks kind of a little boring. There's no animations on there, and maybe we can make the website look a little more lively when we add animations to it. So okay. We're going into our CSS for this one. And we last time we talked over we added borders, so we talked about that. But now this time I want to add a hover animation. So in CSS, you can actually add animations every time you hover over something, every time the mouse hovers over a div or whatever HTML element that is. So you can do that through doing item and then colon hover. So whatever code we add in here is going to be applied when we hover over the HTML element that has the class item. So we can add a box shadow to this, box dash shadow, and we're adding 0, 0, 20 pixels, and then black. So now if I hover over this, you can see that there's a box shadow that gets applied. And I also want to make it so every time I hover over it, my cursor becomes a pointer. So to do that, we can simply do cursor and then pointer. And now you can also add animations. So we have a smoother transition from just no box shadow to a box shadow. And we can do that through the transition, a CSS property. And we're going to say we want to transition our box shadow over the span of 0.5 seconds. Now if I refresh this, and now you can see that our box shadow gets transitioned from no box shadow to a box shadow with a thickness of 20 pixels. And if this 20 pixels is a little too thick, you can always adjust this to whatever value you want. In this case, 10 pixels also works. And this style gets applied to all of our items. Okay. So now we've added this, but now I want to add a cart section up here that keeps track of how many items I've clicked on. So I'm going to go back over here. This is where our JavaScript comes into play. What we're going to do now is every time we click on an item, I want to add it to the cart. So I'm going to add an on click to the item over here. And in our script.js, I'm going to create a function called add to cart. Okay. So every time we click on here, I want to run the function add to cart over here. And then same thing over here. I want an on click. Whenever we click on it, we want to add to cart. But right now, our add to cart function doesn't do anything. So I wanted to keep track of how many items we have in the cart. So actually, we have to add that to our nav bar too. So over here on our nav bar, I'm going to add another div, and we're going to call this cart. And inside of our cart div, we are going to create a span. I'm going to call this cart count. So this keeps track of how many things we have in here. And it's going to hold a value of 0. So there's 0 items added to the cart. So now refresh this. You can see that there's a 0 on there. And I'm actually going to add another span over here. Cart. There you go. You can see there's a cart and it has 0 items in it right now. So now inside of our add to cart, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do var cart count. So this is going to, we're creating a variable called cart count. And I want to do document.get element by ID. And I'm going to get the ID based off of cart count over here. So I'm going to get the ID of cart dash count. So now I've gotten this HTML element over here. at 0. And now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna say var count, so is equal to parse int. I'll explain what we're doing over here once I'm done typing this. Cart count dot inner text. So what we're doing over here is basically in JavaScript, there are two types of things. There are strings and then there are integers. In this case, strings is what keeps track of text. So over here, our count, the number 0 is actually represented as a text. And in order to do operations on it, say add 1, subtract 1, or multiply it by 2, we need to convert it to an integer. So when we do document.getElement by ID, we're getting the 0 number over here as an HTML element. And when we do .enter text, this is going to return a string. And we can't do math on strings, so we need to convert it to an integer. So let me show an example. So this is a string. This is what cart.count is going to return, but we can't actually multiply or do any math with it. So we need to tell JavaScript to convert this string into a number like that. So if I had, say, these many items in our cart, we can't actually do math operators on it. I can't say I want to add one item. But what we can do is we can actually turn that into an integer through parse int. And I can say whatever number, and I can do +1. So that's going to increment that number by 1. That's what we're doing over here. We're just getting the count of how many items are in the cart as an integer. And I just want to say count equals to count +1. So we're adding 1 to the count. Another way you can do this is you can do count ++, which tells JavaScript to add 1, or you can do count plus equals to 1, which also does the same thing. And then you want to say cart count dot inner HTML is equal to count. So now we've updated the value. So now if I refresh, if I click on this, you'll notice that we've added 1. We can keep clicking on it, and every time we click on something to add it, it gets updated over here.